the source of conflict is often just disconnect. And I say the problem is not the problem, because usually when the disconnect turns into a connect, the problem, the solution finds you. It's not that you need to search for the solution, but the moment where you have the connection, whatever the solution is, it's gonna come to you. Hello and welcome. So today we are going to talk about conflict resolution. And I picked this topic because currently in the world there's a lot of conflict going on. And I think going a bit back to the fundamentals is quite crucial. And I want to also give you guys a few points on what mistakes you can make during conflict resolution, especially which can cause things to go even worse. And I'm gonna say these things also in the light of current world conflicts like in Israel at the moment with Gaza and on the northern border where they struggle, but also regarding what's going on in Ukraine. But don't misunderstand, these things apply to you personally too. So that is quite crucial. Never forget also, by the way, the game which is played in politics and in international politics is a bit a different game. It's more like in the wild than within society when we humans meet. But I'm not going to go into that topic today. I'm going to go into just straight conflict resolution mistakes. So first mistake and largest mistake always made is the problem is not the problem. And now most people will be like, what? But we fight because of this, you know? Always this same topic between us, blah, 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 blah. The problem is not the problem. So what is the real problem? I mean, what is the source of conflict at all? I researched it a long time ago, already when I was very young, regarding what is conflict at all. And I wrote it, by the way, down in my first book, the only one I published. And it is quite easy to say that it is often there multiple things, but it comes down to that there is an illusion of misunderstanding. That you feel that the other person, or you believe the other person, does not understand you and does also not care. So in a way, it's first of all that you have the illusion of misunderstanding. I mean, the other person might really not get your point, but also you might. What I mean by illusion of misunderstanding is that that for you it seems the other person doesn't want to understand you, and this gap is not being bridged. The second thing is, in that sense, and we are getting closer to it, because it's describing the same thing from a different angle, is that there is an empathic disconnect between you and the other side. That either one side or both can't put themselves into each other's shoes and see it from their side and their needs. So there's a break in connection between the people. So as I told you before in one of my previous videos too, the source of conflict is often just disconnect. And I say the problem is not the problem, because usually when the disconnect turns into a connect, the problem, the solution finds you. It's not that you need to search for the solution, but the moment where you have the connection, whatever the solution is, it's gonna come to you. You don't have to go out to it, okay? Because you both are then on the same side, and all of a sudden when the connect happens, very quickly, you figure out what is the real problem, and then you resolve it like nothing, okay? So the solution comes by building the connection and the empathy, right, Little? Yeah, she's on board with me. Okay. So, but what are real warning signs? Things where stuff gets out of hand. And it's the opposite. And I really warn here now explicitly for it, which you see especially in the Israel conflict, which is dehumanization. So dehumanization is widening the gap, the empathic gap. And dehumanization is usually where it starts to break down, where people don't put themselves into each other's shoes anymore, where they don't even try to reach out and to build a bridge empathically. And that is where things are gonna get really ugly, really ugly. And we see that basically now in the current Israel conflict, that when you get to that point of dehumanization, where you see others as animals and not as people anymore, which for me, by the way, doesn't matter, but Um, yeah, for me, everyone, she's a human too. But you get it, right? Dehumanization, extremely dangerous. But also segregation. Segregation is always a bit of dangerous predecessor. So if you always segregate yourself extremely strongly, you automatically create a tension. And I don't say you need to let everyone always in your house and have no personal space. Personal space is really important. You need personal space and you have a right to personal space and privacy. And it's an absolutely essential need for every being. And even animals do it. They build their own burrows and all of that, and their own nests. They don't let random people come into their nests. So privacy is a fundamental need, but you need to have a certain degree of openness. And openness means loving, okay? So the moment where you start segregating yourself extremely strongly, you automatically create a bit this tension and hate and whatever it is by itself, because you make things exclusive. You cutting out breaks automatically the empathic connection. So it's quite dangerous to segregate yourself strongly, but also segregate others by force, and especially getting them all in one place, like in Gaza or in other places. It's extremely dangerous doing that, because if you force segregation, that usually arises the tensions more than if, for example, kids of different origin go to the same school. That is way better than sorting them out and putting them in different places, because then they don't have the chance to figure out that, hey, every kid is the same as me in their basic needs. There are definitely cultural fundamental differences, but beyond that, there are basic living being needs, and they are always the same. And if you don't see that anymore, then you get to this stage of dehumanization and radicalization, right? So really bad, extremely bad to segregate. And at this point, I still want to say that empathic connection is crucial, but you cannot always avoid fighting, especially when it comes to very extremist forces. So the thing with fighting is, and I fought quite a lot in my life during my martial arts times, that you need to hurt someone really badly, and you need to make sure that your loved ones are safe, that the situation is safe, that everyone behind you is safe, that the children in the circumstances are maybe safe, whatever the motivation is. So fighting cannot always be avoided. You know, sometimes you just have to take the punch and go for the kill. But it's quite crucial to never abandon, and this is the hard part of it, to never abandon your loving connection to everything and the other side. And what I really like to tell people always that, and they don't get it, is you need to see the tragedy of the situation. You need to see that, for example, currently in Ukraine and Russia, two people on the battlefield meet, which kill each other, which would, under non-political circumstances, just sit down with each other and have a beer. And I hope you get it. Like, there is no motivation for them fundamentally to kill each other, except for those political agendas which push the people on top of each other, okay? So you need to see a bit, even when sometimes you have to do these things, because otherwise they come into your home and kill your kids and family, that, okay, you might need to hurt or kill someone, unfortunately, in these very extremist environments, but you always be aware that there is a tragedy behind it. Stay a human. And that is freaking hard, because that can tear you apart. Because I told you before in one of my videos about commandments, the commandments in the Bible are given as a guideline. So if you violate them, usually you get punished deep inside here. Okay? You get hurt. Like, there is something like a force which makes you regret these things and cause to you trauma and all of that. All of that is a consequence of violating general rules which you should not have violated. And that is the consequence, but you need to endure that. You need to see the tragedy in it, because otherwise you will become a demon. And you don't want to become a demon, because from that moment on, you'll pass on even more trauma. And I want to tell that explicitly because I saw a lot in families, and also partially in my family, the tragedy of the Second World War. And the tragedy was that there are people from the World War traumatized who could not deal with what happened. And out of this tragedy and this trauma, they passed that on in a narcissistic form to other people. So it goes through the generations, and every generation has a chance to clean it up if they get lucky. So that is the good part, but the bad part is usually it takes a few generations to reduce that and build that down. It takes a lot of cleanup. It's extremely dirty and hard. So you need to be really, really careful there, because trauma there is a point where you can't come back so easily anymore. And sometimes there is a way back, but it means it's something like dying. You need to cross a line where the person which you have been needs to die in order for a new one to be reborn. And that is so painful that most people will never cross that threshold. So my recommendation here, sometimes despite the disconnect, don't abandon the connection, even if you have to fight and you have to do things you wouldn't like. You need to endure what's coming afterwards. That is the responsibility of being an adult, right? But what can we otherwise do, except for demolishing other people? When it comes to just discussions between people, I always recommend repeat each other phrases. That just shows that you care. And also it helps you to memorize it better, because sometimes we don't hear what other people say word by word. And it is very good practice and habit to make sure that message is received as it was spoken. Okay, so it's a little bit like that. Another good one is remove personalization. We'll go into that later a bit more. Then the next one is you need to do actions which display care. It's very easy to say, I care about you, but nothing is happening. Forget what people say. Words are nothing. Everyone can say everything. I had that my whole life. Look at what they do. And the best thing, really what I figured out, is do little actions of kindness and loving. And I don't know, sometimes just bring your wife home some flowers sometimes when you find nice. Even when you find them on the field, whatever. Make her a nice tea when you make yourself a tea. And take a little bowl, put some nuts in, bring it her. Different things you can do for your partner, for your friends. Currently I'm baking lots of bread, so I always make one bread extra, give it to my neighbors, my friends, whoever comes across, whoever I feel is in the moment. And I get so much, I gave my neighbor a bread. A week later, she brought me a whole apple pie. You see, you give, you get. I didn't even expect it. I didn't even need it. But it's just, you show that you genuinely care. Because you act, and then people care more about you too. It's really, really good to bridge any discomfort. And so the next time, I'm noisy or they are noisy, it's so much easier to go over and say, hey, dude. Right? It's such a good thing. And generally, do things which form a bit of connection. So there's a lot of things I really don't like. For example, parties and drinking. And I live in Spain, so you can guess it's maybe not the best place for that, because my neighbors also like to make their celebrations from time to time. I love them, but definitely not my permanent thing. But still, just come for a little bit, half an hour, just, to be around. It's fine. You don't need to go all in, but it's just good sometimes to show that you're willing to go a bit their way, even if just a little bit. That is usually already enough. And also, I want to maybe also go a bit now again towards the situation with Israel and Gaza. When it comes to making connection, for example, one of the best things, let's forget Hamas at the moment, because if you have extremist forces teaching kids, that's usually never going to work out in the end anyway, no matter what you want to do. But to teach connection, you could make children exchange programs. The children from both sides start playing together again, because Now in 20 years later, you have the currently born children will be new Hamas fighters. But if you get the kids of both generations to learn to respect and care with each other, in 20 years, you wouldn't have an October 7th anymore. You would have something in the opposite direction, you know, a form of an event of mending maybe would happen or whatever. You get it. You need to form more connection, and it's always good with kids, you know. The old ones sometimes can't learn anymore, don't want to learn anymore, whatever. You know, but we are all gonna die at some point, and our kids take over. Then it's always good to instill good new things into our kids so they can maybe work up where we failed. Another thing where creating a we or a connection is always good is maybe, like in Germany, create memorial days. You know, after Germany was Second World War, I think Germany is the best representation, and I as a German can talk quite freely about that. Regarding denazification. So we had, the atrocities we did in Second World War is hard to take like, if you think about the mechanical way of killing people, this is horrible as hell. So, but one good thing is, you know, to all sides come together and have a memorial day and say, never again. We want to have that never again. And it's not even about which side had it worse to endure or whatever. It's just both come together and say, we don't want any people on both sides to die anymore. And nowadays, we still have our fun with the French. I don't want to jump in there. But I'm really happy we can go over and buy some good food from them, because I think theirs is really great. So I'm really happy we made peace with you guys. And yeah, maybe on October the 7th, Memorial Day, where both sides come together and say, this was such a tragedy what both sides did back then. We never want to have it happen again. But I know I don't want to push the naive one here, because let's be honest, there's politics at play, and politics is something a bit different, and they don't care about these things so much. It's a power play and game. So that is a bit a different thing. I still want to give a bit the closing of the circle. Like I said, sometimes a hard cleanup is necessary. Sometimes you need to make it worse before you can make it better again. But the mending is mandatory. You need to form that empathic connection again. Because like some pits have no bottom. You can always dig deeper. You don't want to dig deep, because it's going to take you a long time getting out of it again. If at all. And like I said, in the Bible, there is even the warning that God wiped out humanity and Noah survived, because he was like, this is such a nonsense stuff going on here. Like, the atrocities being done on any side or whatever is way too severe. I can't deal with it anymore. It's not fixable. Wipe it off and start anew. Okay, so a bit the warning there. This has been a long one, but it's the most important one for me. Okay, the problem is not the problem. See connection. And when you have connection, you will find automatically the solution. Number 2. Also a good one. Pushing instead of pulling. Now, people will be like, what? And yeah, one big problem is often that you try to push something onto someone else. You try to project from yourself onto the other side. And there's a really nice Buddhist principle which says, always when you push, you get a counterforce. It's just how it works automatically. And I said that once to another person who was always very brute in their arguments. And I said, you know, you might be right in a lot of cases, but no one wants to digest the truth if it gets punched in the face all the time with all brutality and anger and that. Like, you know, it takes so much effort distilling truth out of a traumatic situation like that. It's extremely inefficient. Okay, so pushing is extremely dangerous in that sense. But I'm gonna go around. Like, pushing is not bad per se. So when you push, you get a counterforce. Okay. And then what often happens is you push, the other person pushes back, pushes maybe stronger, you push stronger back, you get it. And then in the end, you end up with strong resistances on both sides. What you build up is basically a greater disconnect. So your in a worse situation than you were in the beginning. Okay? And also a big problem with that is that it's like in a fight, like both push, so the conflict gets greater, but no one goes for the finisher. No one wants to seal the deal and goes for the real push. You get it? So it says, let's stop this. This is not going to work. Whatever. You get it? Sometimes you can just break up and say, okay, friendship's done. Like, we can't resolve it. Whatever. You know? Or let's break up as a couple. But people usually don't want to go for that. Sometimes for good and sometimes for bad reasons. So, you know, pushing always more is maybe then not the right strategy. Because you just make it bigger. Okay? So, a better solution, which works most of the time, is pulling. Pulling goes more, again, into the direction of empathy, because I do that often, or did that often when I held a lot of presentations in the past. You need to figure out who the other person is, because then you know at which house they live. Then you need to figure out in which house you live, and I hope you figured that out already, but most people never do, actually. It's quite funny. And then you need to, when you have those two, you can figure out how you can walk the other person from their house to your house. But in order to get that done, you first need to know where that other person is standing. So every time, I don't know, for example, I held a presentation somewhere at a congress, I always try to figure out what people are visiting that congress first, because that is quite crucial in order to walk them over to my home, okay? Because otherwise I will just talk stuff and they will never get what I really want, not my needs, whatever, my whole environment, the whole physique in my universe, it's totally different. So you can ask one good thing is to figure out where the other person lives is, you can ask them questions. Generally, asking questions is a good thing because that shows interest. I have a friend here, Helen. Like, she's the master of asking questions. I think every time I talk to her, I feel really terrible because, like, she asks 80% of the time just questions to me. And I ask so little compared to her. But, yeah, she's definitely very, very towards that. Amazing. Really like that. So, ask questions. And a good question is always, even if you propose something, hey, how do you feel about doing that? And the good thing is you don't push on her or him. You ask the other side, what is your opinion on that? And then you basically pull it out and they can pull it in because you ask them to pull it in. Do you get it? So it's quite nice. And the reason why it's good is because it's their choice whether they take it or not. So it's the same as at work. When your boss always pushes work to you, that is really screwed up. It doesn't feel great. But if you get work and you can pull it in depending on how you are at the moment, and it's a bit of a privileged situation for me as a software engineer, but you know, sometimes stuff breaks down and I don't have so much time, and then I just, you know, even if someone pushes work to me, it doesn't constantly work like that. Okay, so sometimes I just need more time and sometimes less. But also sometimes you have someone like my colleague who has like young child or multiple young children, and you can see in his eyes in the morning meetups that, yeah, I guess he needs less load. And it's really great if these people can regulate it a bit themselves. You get it? So ask questions. Make pull, not push. That is always a really good thing. But here I also want to still give the closing of the circle, which is the true art is balancing push and pull. Okay. Because, you know, sometimes people are very soft, and we go in that in a second. That's gonna be number 3. And then you have to squeeze them because they evade all the time. So you need to push a bit there. Okay. So again, generally, I would recommend pulling because most people push. It's just how everything most of the time works. Okay. So try pulling a bit for a change. It's really great. And try to balance that a bit more. That is then the art in the end, that you understand when to push and pull how. That is it. But it's usually the counterbalance to the normal is try pulling. And then you can master the art of both at the same time. Mistake number 3. Avoiding friction versus seeking truth. And that is a really, really good one. Why? And I wrote a post not long ago. I couldn't put it in the video description, but the truth can be very uncomfortable. Okay? And some people, they really like to stay polite to avoid discomfort. Okay? So they stay polite. They don't want to push too much on the topic or whatever. You get it? And by that, you never figure out what the real problem is. Okay? So this is a bit nowadays like it. It's like a tragedy we have nowadays in space, because everyone has been raised to be so polite and friendly, always at work. We need to be so polite and respectful. And it's very disrespectful to say things which might hurt the other side. You get it? And not okay. This, you will never get anywhere if you go like this, because you will never get down to the real problems you face. And problems and the truth of the problem might be extremely uncomfortable. Okay? That people have self-sabotaging behavior, and it displays itself quite obviously. And you look at that person and say, hey, you look really unhappy the last weeks. And like, nah, I'm okay. I'm just tired. No, like, don't tell me that story. You get it? So sometimes you need to dig a bit there and go into the discomfort and give someone else discomfort on yourself. And friction is good. Friction is very good. Why is friction so good? Because it makes you a better rounded off person, and people don't get hurt at your edges so easily anymore. Okay? Like, friction creates true beauty, and you will never get rid of it, and it will make you a better person if you handle it healthily. But no friction is for infants. It's for kids. You'll never grow up if you have no friction. You need to be able to handle friction with life, because life itself was created in a way that it rises and creates friction. That is the test we are given here. That is why it's often interpreted, the Bible, why life is like a test. Because it's built basically to make friction, to force you, and to see if you can still prevail in making this the best frickin' place, despite basically an almost impossible situation of making peace and harmony, because of the rules of the game. Okay? So, what is problems, especially when it comes to avoiding friction? How does it display if you talk to a person? One is very often being defensive. What do I mean? Let's say you say, hey, maybe a good one. I had recently I nailed a guy because some people were relying on him, and he let them down again. And it happened multiple times already. And I said, hey, what's up? Like, why did you come back so late again? You know, these people were relying on you. And the other person became defensive right away. Like, yeah, I wanted to do X and this. Doesn't matter what he said, but you get it. That other person tries to explain it. But explaining is basically, it doesn't help at all. That's not what the other person wants to hear in that situation. Do you get it? If people start to explain very long why they did something, it's usually a pretty bad indicator that this person is actually currently just defensive about themselves. That they want to avoid taking on the responsibility that something happened which was ugly because of their action. Whether it was justified or not does not even matter. Okay? I mean, there could have been something like I was late because of a car accident. Okay? But you can always tell people, but you know, I could have also come back earlier, and I probably will do that next time, or I should have called you, you know, and let you know faster. You get it. Like, if you just give a bit like this, like just a hint of, hey, I see that I could have done something. You take on responsibility by saying, Sometimes stuff just happens, but I still care about you and I don't want this to repeat. Integrated. But most people, they just go into defensive mode. Like, yeah, you know, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Like, if people come like that at me, I already know, like, it's never gonna lead anywhere. They're never gonna grow up. No chance. It's just staying a child, basically. Another tactic, which, yeah, is saying yes to everything. You notice, people? You did do that again. Why did you do that? You know? Why do you always, I don't know, drink way too much alcohol? Yes, you're right. You know, I should drink less. Yeah. And then person goes, same thing again. And same thing again. And same thing again. And yes saying, again, excuse. It's just an excuse. If there are no consequences in action, doesn't matter what that person says. And the only way to sometimes make sure that these people understand it is that you squeeze them a bit, that you stay on top, that you tell them, hey, like, you did that now 3 times already, and I'm really not in for a 4th time. So what can we do to change that? Okay. And I really warn you, I also had cases with people also in my life, which even if you nailed them right in the corner and made it so obvious, and especially narcissistic people do that, they will never acknowledge it, even if you have them all railed up and the whole world around them collapses, because everyone knows what's going on. They're not gonna acknowledge it. Then in these situations, just walk away. Don't spend any energy on it. Trust me on that one. It's not gonna be worth it, right? So one quote which you should remember from this avoiding friction versus seeking truth is, and I have that in my blog posts, sometimes we need to talk about harsh truths, but we need to do so without harshness. So what I say is, you can talk about something extremely uncomfortable, but you can say it in a way that it's not very harsh. You get it? And that is usually the best way to talk about these things. And that is the best description I could find so far for describing how to seek truth despite the truth being really uncomfortable. Don't try to make it nicer. Don't add some words. Just say, it was really screwed up situation. Okay? And that is fine. Then you're gonna be really great. And one other thing I always also like to say is, the truth often hides under heavy fire. So you need to be a bit careful, because if you speak very harsh all the time, the truth is really tough to get people out. Because imagine a person that has had trauma in childhood and they have a toxic pattern because of it, of self-sabotaging behavior. Okay, whatever, avoiding in certain situations, responsibility, whatever it might be. So imagine you give these people too much pressure, then the truth is gonna hide even more. Okay? And you'll never get it out. And that is why I say, if you are very harsh in tone with these people, then the truth will definitely never come out of them. And it's already hard to get the truth out, because usually it's hiding so deep, especially these very fundamental issues. And I know it about myself, because I had to fix a few things in myself over the years. That, yeah, you will never get it out. So here, really, really be careful with harshness generally. Really be careful. It can totally mess up the situation. Yeah. What are good solution strategies still? Form an empathic connection. Let the other person at all times know that you genuinely care about them. Okay? And for example, Tucker Carlson is always very smart about this, because always when he talks about the opposite side, like Russia, and he tries to go into their position, it could be easy that there is a disconnect between him and his nation, or the people, his listeners in his nation. And he's very smart about it, because he forms the empathic connection again, because he says, then affirms all the time that he's a patriot and he wants to still continue living in USA because he loves the country, whatever. He expresses it. And by that, he bridges the gap right away again. So he talks about very uncomfortable things, but at the same time, he builds up empathy and connection all the time to make sure that both sides don't lose it. Okay? And by that, he can go into uncomfortable depth. And I really like that one, how he does that. It definitely shows how much maturity he has in that regard and experience. But no doubt, I mean, after that career he had, he definitely has a lot of experience. Yeah. Another good thing is seeking truth, to have a partner which prevents us from stopping diving deeper, from giving easy excuses. Sometimes we like to come up with just simple excuses. Yeah, you know, I was just tired. No, you were not just tired. Like, don't tell me that story. Like, there is definitely something wrong going on here. You know, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine for me, but don't give me these excuses. You get it? And it takes a lot of training, because you also yourself, you need to train yourself to look a bit at people's faces. Ask less how they are. Just look at them. And usually most of the time, you already know what's up. You can ask a question. And even if you're wrong, people usually like it, because at least you're interested into them. Okay? You're not just, how are you? Good? How are you? Good? Fine. You know, it is just so superficial. Right. My last one is, when it comes to a little bit harder cases, seeking truth is, and that is a bit against the one I said previously, pushing instead of pulling instead of pushing. Sometimes you need to lock someone in a corner and squeeze it out of them, and not let them evade in any situation, in any direction. Always when they try to come up with excuses or whatever, you knock them out of the ring right away into the corner, and make sure that they stay there. And they get so squeezed and squished until they can't hold it together anymore. And in these moments where usually people can't hold it together anymore, there's a very Buddhist way of doing things, that you kind of get so tired and worn out of keeping up the illusion that you drop it and it comes out in that moment. And that is how you get it out and resolve it in that moment. I had a few of those in my life too. Oh, that was freaking painful, I can tell you. Definitely not my favorite situations, but I'm really glad I went through them. Every hardship I had in my life made me a better person. So yeah, every time I face new hardship, I always tell myself that, because otherwise I go crazy. That is definitely the case. Let's go to number 4. Mistake number 4. Not willing to let go. Clinging to your identity and not taking personal responsibility. Okay. So what do I mean with not willing to let go, or clinging to your identity, or taking things personal? Imagine someone comes around, you have an argument with someone you know already for a bit more, and the person says, "You're such a retard," you know. And you could take the person and say, "You son of a mother." You get it? Like, you could play that game back, because it makes you angry, because that person, like, who's that? You know? But you need to don't take it personal. And at that moment, usually you see the picture. So if a person comes at you and says, "You're such a retard," and then you can step up and see how that person is frustrated. Okay, why is that person frustrated? So you can go then to the person and flip it around and say, "You seem to be really frustrated. Like, what's up?" And like I said, not all people want to give you the answer. But the reason is, you take their power in that moment. Because if you push back, they still have that power, because they have control over you. Why do they have control over you? Because you give them the power that they make you resist and revolt in that moment. Okay? If they make you with their power submit, that's wrong too. Do you get it? So never let someone else dictate that you resist or submit. That is really bad. But if you flip it around and you say, hey, where's your frustration coming from? In that moment, you take their power. They have no chance of really coming back from that one. And that is a good strategy a bit in that sense. Okay, yeah. I was a bit confused by my notes. Yeah. So you see, in these critical situations, ease up. Relax a bit. You know, look at behavior. Always looking at behavior is best strategy I can really recommend to you. Often it's also good if you have a third person who are in the vicinity which does that. But I know the darkest stuff always happens behind closed doors. It's just how humans are. They are just all cowards. They don't do stuff in the open. Yeah, until now, where lots of mobile phones are in the Israel conflict and the Gaza conflict, and you see from both sides what's going on. It's definitely something. Yeah. So don't take anything personal. Try to really disassociate it, and it's hard. And like I won't tell you here miraculous things, but I lose my stuff too. It's just how we are sometimes. But for as long as we try and we try to get our moments to get back to it, I think that is the crucial piece. Yeah. So, for example, one case which I witnessed also in my life is if your partner says, be more at home for the family, please. Like you're always at your job, you work all the time, you're never home. And the worst thing you can usually say in that situation is, but. Because it's very impolite in such situations to shove your butt into someone else's face. Yeah, but always, everything after but doesn't count. Because you could say, but I'm needed, you know, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And that is, again, you cling to your identity. You think your job is your identity or whatever. It's always the same game. Okay, because you identify with your job, it gives you status. You're Mr. XYZ. Forget it. You might lose your job tomorrow and then you're nothing again. Then your family is still around and they're gonna cheer at you. And if you have a really good relationship with a wife, for example, like that person is gonna admire you whether you have a job or not. But she might still kick your butt, so be careful. So that is that part. So how can you resolve that? Usually look at behavior. Don't get too much lost with, I don't know, I'm this, I'm that, blah blah blah. I'm usually, if you say something with I'm vegan, I'm, I don't know, meat eater, I'm blah 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 blah. Really bad. Look at behavior. Look at the behavior, what you do, and say, not I'm beer lover, I had that example before, but say, I drink a beer every second evening, right? That is the behavior. And now it's very impersonal. You can say, yeah, I can drink less beer, you know. Maybe it's still hard to get there, don't get me wrong, but at least you don't take it personal. You're not a beer lover. It would violate my identity as a beer lover to drink less beer, you get it? Blah, 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 blah. You know, don't take it personal. Don't make identities, don't fuzz around. You are just behavior, you're just a pattern, and you can change that pattern, and it's gonna be hard, but it's not gonna be bad necessarily, right? So look at, if your wife kicks your butt, maybe you should look at where do you have more time for the family, you know? Take a day, definitely always for the family or different things, you know? Make time in some evenings at least. Look at the behavior and make changes to it, and you're gonna be good. So these are actually the 4 largest mistakes. Mistake number 1, just to reflect, is the problem is not a problem. The biggest problem is the empathic disconnect, so you need to form connections again. And we said solutions were repeat other phrases, remove personalization, make actions displaying care to others, create a we, and create just generally any form of action for connection and common shared events. 2 was pulling instead of pushing. So don't try to necessarily push your stuff on other people. Ask questions, propose things, but then ask whether they like it or not, or ask them for giving their solutions. So you pull out, you don't push. That usually makes things a lot easier. The third one is avoiding friction with it versus seeking truth, which goes into the opposite direction, where we said the truth can sometimes be uncomfortable and we need to give it some space. So the resolution there was more or less talk about harsh truths, but without harshness. Okay, so don't make artificial harshness around what's already very uncomfortable, and try to keep up the empathic connection while it's uncomfortable, because otherwise it breaks down. You might lose the other side. Yeah, and if it's really hard, lock them in a corner and punch the shit out of them until you get the truth out. And mistake 4, don't take things personal. Like I said, flip it a bit around. Try to not be personal. Ask yourself the question, why does the other person do that or say that? What's really behind it? How do they feel? How are they? So you kind of step in their shoes and see they're just frustrated by attacking you personally. And then you have at least a chance of getting to where the real problem was. Okay, these are my top 4 for conflict resolution mistakes. I hope you can get something out of them, and otherwise, see you soon.